Start today with President Wilson commits to American neutrality. I would preface this by saying that President Wilson was not real fond of Germany. He saw Germany as what he called a lawless nation. So obviously if he had to favor a side during this conflict in Europe, he would favor the Allies. But he strongly believes that the Allies could win this war without the United States. And so as a result of that, he's going to adopt a policy of formal neutrality. Okay, so again, President Wilson was not real fond of the country of Germany. He considered Germany a lawless nation. So if he had to pick a side, he certainly would have picked the side of the Allies. Okay? But he strongly believed that the Allies could win this war in Europe, not even called a world war yet because it's only in Europe, without the help of the United States. And so as a result of his beliefs, he adopts a policy of formal neutrality, which means he's not going to take either side publicly. Although I'm sure he favored the Allies. Okay? He wants to keep the United States out of this because he knows of the catastrophic implications if we get in. Okay? The trouble is, kiddos, everybody has an opinion, right? Every American citizen has an opinion, and we are a nation of immigrants. So we've got people that live here from Germany, we've got people that live here from France, we've got people that live here that are from Austria and Hungary and Turkey and Russia and Great Britain. And so it's really difficult to seize emotions on this, because when you think of your ancestry, you're thinking, gee whiz, we should be over there helping Russia because I'm from Russia. We should be over there helping Germany because I'm from Germany. And so you have to remember that depending on where your ancestors came from might be who you think we should be supporting in this conflict in Europe, which made it difficult on President Wilson to keep everybody together on this neutrality scene. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of irony when it comes to this time in history compared to others. Anybody in here Irish? Okay. Who would the Irish Americans be favoring? Would they be favoring Germany, Turkey, Austria, Hungary, or would they be favoring Great Britain, France, and Russia?
Great Britain.
Why?
Because it's over by them.
Okay, does that mean they get along? Does Ireland get along with Great Britain very well back in those days? Not at all. Matter of fact, they hated each other. So despite the fact that Ireland had no love for Germany, they hated Great Britain. So they sided with Germany in this conflict, which might surprise you since here in the United Kingdom, so to speak, right? The one that's more ironic and almost horrific is guess who American Jews supported in World War I? Germany. Man, oh man, how that table turned in World War II almost gives you goosebumps. So American Jews at this time in history favored Germany in this conflict in Europe. That sure didn't work well for them in World War II, did it? We'll talk about that next year. So it's kind of interesting. And the overall job of President Wilson is try to unite all these citizens of the United States to stay neutral when their emotions were telling them not to, from both sides. Okay? All right, that'll take us to controversy surrounding German submarines in Europe. Controversy surrounding German submarines in Europe. Kind of a side note, the country of Germany was the first country in the world to use the submarine in any length or fashion. And people referred to German submarines as U-boats. U-boats is what they were called. As I was mentioning, I'd like to show you a video towards the end of the year called U-571. Which is a German U-boat. It was number 571. It's quite a story. But anyway, German U-boats were very, very controversial at this time because they were attacking Allied ships. They were attacking ships from Great Britain and France and Russia. Why would they be attacking those ships, Jonathan?
To inside supplies.
Right. They're going to be shipping supplies into war zones. War zone around Russia, war zone around France, war zone around Great Britain. Do you think the Germans wanted those three warring countries to be getting supplies to each other? No. So these German U-boats were attacking these Allied ships. Now, they didn't have necessarily be warships or merchant ships. What else could they be that the Germans might suspect that they are having contraband on? Well, not so much, well, passenger ships, okay? So, here's kind of what happens here. You remember our old saying back in the old days, freedom of what? Freedom of the seas. Well, they still had that freedom of the seas philosophy here, but during wartime, there was an international agreement that if you're planning on sinking someone's ship, that you had to give them fair warning so they could get the crew off. Because the idea of sinking the ship wasn't to kill the crew. What was the idea of sinking the ship? Sink all the supplies and equipment, food that were going to these warring nations. So the rule was, on the high seas at this time, is if you were going to sink a ship during wartime, you had to warn that ship so they could get the crew up. Now my question to you is, why did German submarines or U-boats refuse to do that? Why didn't they follow the international law? Anybody want to guess why they didn't? Sort of. How would a German submarine warn a vessel on top of the ocean? They would have to surface. And what does that make the vessel? Very vulnerable. Submarines sitting on the surface is a very vulnerable thing. How do they attack you? With torpedoes under the water. So if they come up to the surface and show themselves to warn you, if you're an enemy ship, what might you do? Shoot at them, if you could. And by the time they got themselves submerged, they'd be sitting ducks. So that's why they refused to do that. They refused to surface and warn anyone because they put them in such a vulnerable position. So what might they do to try to follow the law? They said, well, you know, we'll try to follow it. How do they do that? How do they do that? No. They basically go public and say any ship entering war zones around France, Great Britain, or Russia, we are going to sink. They gave kind of a verbal overall warning, a shotgun approach, right? Saying that, listen, here's the deal. We're at war. If you take a ship into war zone waters in any of the warring countries, we're going to sink you. That was their rule. That was a blanket warning. Well, when President Wilson heard about this new blanket warning, why was he concerned? We're trying to stay neutral, but we're still trying to what? Make money. And what are we doing with those three countries, and probably Germany too? We're trading, okay? Well, these submarines and these Central Powers, especially Germany, has made it real clear if an American ship goes into a war zone, waters around those warring countries, what are they going to do? They're going to sink them. And I'm going to give you two examples. Well, let me rephrase that. When is America going to be really upset if a vessel is sunk? If what? If civilians are killed. Very good. Let me give you two examples of when American civilians were killed. First one occurred on March 28th of 1915. March 28th of 1915. And what happened is a British passenger liner called the Falaba was sunk by a German U-boat, and one American lost their life. Okay, March 28, 1915, a German submarine sank a British passenger liner called the Falaba, and one American lost their life. Did we pay a little bit of attention to that? But we weren't going to go to war over that, were we? One life, probably. A little less Well, no, yeah. Or I should say, I would be rephrases, okay? A little more than a month later, on May 7th of 1915, a German U-boat sinks another British passenger liner called the Lusitania. The difference from the Americans' perspective is 124 Americans were killed in that one. So a little over a month after the first one, on May 7th, 1915, a German U-boat sinks another British passenger ship called the Lusitania, and 124 Americans are killed. And when asked why you would sink a passenger ship, they said that they believed that the passenger ship was carrying contraband, supplies to warring countries. That's how they justified it. Well, President Wilson was pretty upset about that, and so he basically said to Germany, you sink any more passenger ships and any more American lives are lost, and we will be forced to respond. And how would we have responded, Caitlin? What? Yeah, we'd have declared war on Germany. Do you think Germany wanted any part of that? Germany was fine with fighting Russia and France and Great Britain, but they certainly did not want to fight the United States. So for 2 years, the Germans were a little more selective on what they were shooting down, what they were sinking, because they did not want America into the war on the side of the Allies. So they settled down their barbaric action on passenger ships. They still weren't interested in merchant ships coming over and bringing in supplies, okay? And we had to adhere to that a little bit from the United States because we didn't want war either. Well, right in the middle of this conflict is a presidential election of 1960. Right in the middle of this is a presidential election, the election of 1960. Now, in this election, it'll kind of determine whether the United States favors peace or war. By virtue of what? Who they elect. Because President Wilson is going to get the Democratic nominee for re-election. He's going to favor or peace. Okay? He's going to favor peace. So the whole Democratic campaign is based on, hey, you elect President Wilson, you'll have 4 more years of peace. But if you elect the Republican candidate, Charles Evans Hughes, he's the war candidate, and he will take the United States into a world war if he's elected. So that's kind of how the campaign went. Okay, Democrats nominate Woodrow Wilson for re-election. He's for peace. Vote for him and you'll keep peace. And the Democrats campaigned that if you vote for the Republican candidate, Charles Evans Hughes, you are voting for the war candidate, and more than likely the United States will be at war. So what did Americans favor? About 50-50, because Wilson goes to bed election night thinking he's defeated, because when the early returns come in from the, where geographically? West is the, what time is it right now in New York City? 1, 2, 3, 10. So where are the returns going to come in first when they close the polls at 8 p.m.? The east and the north. So when the returns come in from the east and the north and they start projecting those, Wilson's getting beat quite badly. He actually goes to bed thinking he's going to be defeated, and Charles Evans Hughes goes to bed on election eve thinking that he's going to win the presidency. Well, it just so happened, miraculously, that Wilson won almost all of the South and all of the West. And as a result, by a small margin, he was re-elected President of the United States. So Wilson goes to bed. Hughes goes to bed. Hughes thinks he's going to be the next president. Wilson thinks he's out of office. Results come in from the South and the West, almost completely in favor of Wilson, and he's re-elected in a very close election. Which still tells you what's the balance of going to war or not. About 50-50. Okay, about 50-50. Now, his election gives America a desire for peace, but unfortunately not long afterwards we're going to be at war. Okay? And that takes us to our next subtopic then, which is America declares war on Germany and enters the conflict. So Wilson tried like crazy, but there were two reasons why he just had to give up the ghost and we ended up entering the war. Anybody know what those two reasons are? What is it? What? No, not so much that. He was angry that he couldn't put our merchant ships on the high seas without that risk. So his relationship with who? Germany's bad. So one of the reasons why we end up going to war is our relationship with Germany just got worse and worse and worse. So the stress of our bad relationship was one reason we eventually ended up in war. What might be the other reason? Wilson probably wouldn't have gone in if it wasn't for this reason. Why did we enter? What? No, not that minor. No, why would he enter? If I like Jonathan, I don't particularly like Caleb, but I don't want to get in the middle of their fighting. If all of a sudden Caleb's knocking the tar out of Jonathan, and it looks like Jonathan's going to get knocked out, what might I do because I like Jonathan more than I like Caleb? I go to his aid, right? Second reason was that Wilson was afraid that the Allies were going to lose the war. It was not looking good. So by April 6th of 1917, the United States officially declares war on Germany. Why does the United States officially declare war on Germany on April 6th, 1917? Number one, our relationship with Germany became too stressed to continue. And number two, we were afraid the Allies were going to lose the war in Europe. So, at this point, these European countries that are our allies are in such bad shape, they're just hoping to hang on until we get there. They're afraid that they might lose before we can get there. They're hoping for a tie in any battle they fight and just not a loss, because a major loss might lose the war. So they're just hanging on there, waiting for America to get there because they're about done. Well, let's take some time. How is Wilson going to build an army? He's got two choices. Hasn't got an army really ready to go at all. What are his two choices to build an army? Huh? Ask for volunteers, or what's another way to recruit without your permission, so to speak? Draft. So he has a choice of either asking for volunteers or enacting a draft. Well, what he does on May 7th of 1917 is he signs a bill that will enact the draft in America. Okay, May 7th, that's tomorrow by the way, 1916, excuse me, May 7th, 1917, Wilson signs a bill to enact the draft. And he set the minimum age at what? How old did you have to be drafted? 21. 21 at that time, 21. That was the minimum age, 21. Now, do you know how a draft works? Anybody know how a draft works? So, what happens, you have to register for the draft. You guys have to do that. You boys have to register with the Selective Service. That's a rule when you turn 18, in case we ever had a draft. Well, to let you know how many people were interested, by June 5th, less than a month after he enacted the draft, nearly 10 million men registered. So he's got a pretty big pool, doesn't he, to draw from. So, on May 7th of 1917, Wilson enacts the draft. Less than a month later, on June 5th, he's already got 10 million men that have registered. That's his pool to draw from. Now, does anybody know how a draft works? Okay, so what happens is we have kind of a ping pong ball situation, where they might not draw ping pong balls, but whatever. How many ping pong balls are in the wheel? How many? So 10 million means that you are saying that they draw you by name. And that's not a bad thought, but that'd be pretty cumbersome, wouldn't it? So how many balls are in there? 365. Because what happens is they roll this thing and they pull out a ping pong ball. When's your birthday, Carter? Okay, September 28th is the first ball. Is that right?
September 20th.
Okay, September 20th is the first ball that comes out. That means everybody that registered for the draft, any of those 10 million that have a September 20th birthday, have a number 1 draft number. Draw another ball. What's your birthday?
September 17th.
Okay, September 17th, everybody who has a birthday on that date has a number 2 draft number. Mackenzie, when's your birthday? Okay, it's October 8th, the third ball that's drawn. Everybody that's registered for the draft with an October 8th birthday has got a 3 draft number. And that doesn't mean they'll necessarily draft 365, but they might draft 20 numbers. And if that's not enough men, they'll do it again. In Vietnam especially, you did not want to have a draft number of 1 through 10 because you were going to Vietnam and your chances of survival were minimal if you were an infantryman. So boy, those people that drew 2 and 3, some of them headed which way? North to where? Canada. Okay? So not at this time. The draft is a big deal. 10 million people registered. But that's how the draft works. Okay? So that's how he's going to raise an army, is he's going to have a draft. Now, Wilson's still concerned about getting support for the war because he's got a nation of immigrants. So he's got 2 things in mind. He's got to raise money for the war, and he's got to somehow broadcast out there an anti-German attitude. He wants Americans to hate the Germans, right? So we got to fight them. So you got to hate